René Repasi from S&D.
So thank you for being here with us, and my questions also will rather predictably go into the direction of product safety regulations, given that I have taken over the role of Shadow Rapporteur in this file. And after the introductory comment, I do see somewhat the need to state that I support your analysis of the risk-based approach. We consider the General Product Safety Regulation a safety net for non-harmonized products, and the risk-based approach is turning that one upside down. So I do believe that we actually have to reinforce the safety net function, in particular looking then at the list of obligations that are currently in there. And the issue was already a couple of times mentioned about third country products. And the authorized representatives were mentioned, but the list of obligations applicable to them is rather little. So in that sense, there's more discussion to get that extended. That also refers then to the issue of online marketplaces, but here I do see that we need to wait for the final result of the DSA in order to properly examine this. But there's a close connection to a question that my colleague Christel Schaldemose was raising. It's about the future project on product liability. Ultimately also when we look at enforcement, civil liability is one of the strongest tools that we have to enforce also vis-à-vis third country products. And that is linked to the list of obligations that we have in the General Product Safety Regulation. So in that sense, I would indeed be curious to hear what is the stand of preparations for the revision of the product liability directive or regulation, and on artificial intelligence as well. The second point linked to this is on the due diligence directive, to which this committee will also give an opinion, but it's also linked to the issue of civil liability, which gladly is in there. I'm here wondering to which extent the civil liability that is established as a principle is not undermined by the very fact that there's contractual cascading, by that basically pushing any kinds of potential responsibilities outside of the scope of civil liability, and what's your view why Commission has proposed the possibility to escape civil liability by a rather easy means. And what's your point of view on the burden of proof, which is particularly difficult when we look at civil liability in courts?
Thank you very much. I guess not so easy questions, but I'm looking forward to your answers.
No, thank you very much. First of all, about the right to repair again, because we are working on this for a long period of time. We will work with a set of different rules. It's the same for many kind of elements in our last proposal also about the employment, and you mentioned the civil liability. Of course, if we want to have a real enforcement, we need to work with different instruments, and the product liability will be very important in such a way. Of course, you have listed some questions that we are working on for the moment also in the Commission to take a real decision. And I will say that it's very important to be precise about the list of obligations, because at the end it will be on such a basis that you will have a liability or not, and not to be not so precise. I will say it was my answers about the unfair Commercial Practices Directive. If you have very clear information that you have to give to the consumer in the list, in the annex of the directive, it will be easier to enforce. If we have a clear list of obligations, it will be also easier to go to a liability, a civil liability. Then what kind of responsibility for actors coming from third countries? I said, for the platforms, we ask to have a responsible people in the EU, and that's very important to see who is in charge of the full respect of the obligations that we have got, because the first element is to have a list of obligations, but then to know where you need to go to find the responsible people. And we try to have an answer in our proposal for the product safety on this. But again, is it possible to go further than that with the platform? That will be also in the discussion concerning the DSA in the trilogue, so we'll try to take that into account. About the cascading, it's true that we need also to be very concrete on this and to fix some limits. It's very important that we have clear responsibilities for the people and liability for the people coming to the market with a product. The platform may be the first producer coming to the platform, but not to say it's not my fault, it's due to the supply chain. I know that I'm working also on the supply chain for other reason, but for the civil liability, it's maybe better to stop. About the burden of proof, there's maybe a link with the cascading, of course, because it's very difficult to go to a real proof if you have such a very long list of actors, one after the others, on such a kind of process. But in principle, we are not working on this. Of course, we don't want to have a reverse situation with the burden of proof. We try to follow the normal rules. But again, like for other kind of mechanism, we are not against some change in the relations between the consumers and the producer. We try to do that, to give an example, in the due diligence initiative again, to give, first of all, to the victims, the possible victims, a right to organize a complaint to the company and to discuss and to engage for a compromise with the company, an agreement with the company about the compensation. And if it's not, it will be easier to go to justice after that, because you will have a first discussion with the company. So there are different levels. It's not immediately to organize a reversed charge for the proof, but it's maybe to introduce new elements. But you're right. First, the list of obligations is very important. The responsible people is very important to know who is in front of you, and then to give more possibilities for the consumers alone, through organizations, maybe on a cross-border level, with different organizations at the EU level, to have a better situation in the relation with the producer, and so to have a better access to information. After that, is it needed to change the burden of proof? You know that it's a very sensitive issue, because we need to have an exceptional situation to do that, and not to try to change all the time the burden of proof in the different elements. But you're right, it's the list of questions that we are examining for the moment in the preparation of the new initiative.